Welcome to Doing It My Way by Beata Matras, a podcast about project and product management, communication, brand, and IT. All these topics will definitely improve and have a positive impact on your career. So join me today, subscribe, and expect a new episode every week. Thank you. So today, I'm excited to welcome Denis Salnikov, an experienced Agile coach and consultant. Denis isn't just skilled in leading teams and organizations through Agile transformations. He's also a passionate athlete, and his unique blend of the discipline of sport with Agile consulting expertise is offering a fresh perspective on professional development. In his career, Denis has held significant positions like Agile Trainer and Consultant, Head of Agile Practices, Scrum Master, and currently he thrives as an independent Agile Consultant and LeSS Coach. Welcome to the show, Denis.
Hi, Beata. Hello, everyone. I'm really excited to be here in your podcasts, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Denis. And to kick things off, what led you to become an Agile coach and consultant? Can you share some pivotal moments that shaped your approach to Agile coaching?
Yeah, I think if we will try to cover all the pivotal moments, it will take the whole podcast. So I will try to keep it short. I think there were a few pivotal moments. The first one was when I joined my very first IT company, back then as a sales manager. I was doing some various kind of jobs before that. It was still while attending the university, so I didn't know what I want to do in my life back then. And I discovered IT environment and got very passionate about it. And at some point, I was tasked not to take care only of the sales, but also of supporting our existing customers with working with their projects as an account manager. And yeah, I very soon understood that I'm interested about it. I'm interested about having conversations with customers, having conversations with developers, collaborating with them, making these pieces of puzzle come together in order to produce great outcomes and products. I started attending the university for the master's program on project management. And that's where I got introduced to all things Agile. And it was like probably the most pivotal part of my professional career so far. I started applying different practices and elements of like Kanban, Scrum, overall like Agile values and principles in my workplace. And it really clicked. We were doing, despite working in an outsourcing company, we were doing some product development at that point as well. And we needed really a cross-functional team focused on delivering a product from scratch, delivering something feasible every 2 weeks to show to the customer, to sit together and try it out. And yeah, it produced really good outcomes, I can say, because I was back then doing the role of a Scrum Master for that project and doing the role of project manager for some other projects. And I saw what's the difference in terms of like the customer feedback, how long does it take to get the feedback, how long does it take to actually get something you can try out in your hands and actually use it on your phone or on your laptop. I was really impressed. And yeah, since then, I think it was just going up and up. My second company where I worked as a Scrum Master, I helped them to go through a transformation from a like old style functional teams, like meaning backend people sitting separately in a backend department, front-end people sitting separately in the front-end department, communicating through a project manager. I helped them to transfer to Scrum, to cross-functional teams, to product development. And yeah, once again, it's clicked. I was lucky to have a full support of the CTO of the company. And that was a pivotal moment also because this was the first company was actually developing its own product, not just product for some external customers. And since then, I think there were many more other pivotal moments, but I think I was just lucky to be in the right spot in the right moment of time when there was a demand to try out something I was really interested about. So I was able to kind of come to a place where my current passion and zone of interest is in demand, try it out, experiment, learn something new, do some mistakes, achieve some successes, and just build up on top of that every year until now.
And that's interesting that you mentioned that kind of sales experience had a pivotal role, university degree on project management, and kind of also like connecting it with your passion and being in a good place, being in a good place in the right time, which sometimes we don't want to admit that there is like this piece of uncertainty whether that's a right environment for you, for example, to grow, or that's the right moment for you to grow in a certain area of your personal interests. Also, that's very important, I think.
Yeah, I believe so. I believe that you can be really successful only when you're passionate about something, but at the same time, there are too many things which do not depend on you, which you cannot affect, but which can affect the outcomes of that. So there are like ancients typically called it like more like a fate. Nowadays, people are more skeptical towards such things as fate and religion, but still, I believe that there is definitely some role the fate or just the occasion plays in our lives.
Yeah, that's very philosophical, but the more we grow, the more we learn kind of that the fate has a significant place in our life. Moving to your career as Agile coach and consultant, Dennis, could you explain the main benefits that an Agile coach brings to the company and what you focus on in this role?
I think that very often when people go out to the consultants and look for some advising on agile or on some specific practices, they're actually looking for some practices to be implemented. And I think since like Agile Manifesto and majority of frameworks and methods we apply when working in Agile environments are quite old already. They're at least 15 years old, like Kanban method, or like 20 plus years old as Scrum. Taking it only as a set of practices is a bit outdated. It might have been right when we were back in the early majority or like early discovery stage of the like this exponential growth. But currently we're in a place where I believe people need to actually look for outcomes for the business and outcomes for the company they want to get out of it. I typically say that I can help if the company, first of all, knows what do they want to achieve, what's wrong with the way they currently do things, and like if they have some measurable metrics supporting that, it's even better. And if their end goal is to be more agile, which to me translates into two things. First, focusing on always do the work which brings the most potential value, which I guess you relate to as a product owner. And second, being able to switch from what you're doing now to the new thing as quickly as possible with the lowest switching cost possible. So that's at any moment of time when priorities suddenly change, be it like I know macroeconomical situation, be it new regulatory requirements, or I don't know, new fresh competitor entering the market and rocking the stage. The company needs to have capabilities to be able to start working on the new thing as soon as possible, and it should not cost it like lots of money to do so.
And what do you find most challenging about being an Agile coach?
Yeah, I think the most challenging is exactly the fact that very often people limit the role of agile coach only to implementing what they perceive as agile practices. So I don't know, implementing dailies, implementing plannings, refinements. It's a good case. The worst case is when they also connect it to, I don't know, some very specific practices like, I don't know, story points, velocity, burn down charts, etc. I think that the most challenging, especially if you're working as a Scrum Master or Agile coach within the company, is to overcome this perception and to make people understand that there are much more things you can help with. And for that, you need to, first of all, have some trust, but also have some freedom to like explore what's happening around the team, explore the current architecture of the system, explore the current structure of the company, and take a systemic view onto how all these things influence how we actually work on a daily basis. Because let's say, like, if you bring cross-functional culture and Scrum framework to a company which still has very strict direct reporting lines based on functions. So backend developers report to a backend manager. I don't know, front-end developers report to front-end lead. And even if you combine them into cross-functional teams, they will still have this like dichotomy of vision. They will have they will have the vision coming from the product owner, bringing them some product statements and where we want to come. And at the same time, they will have some goals defined by their direct managers. And in this situation, given that the direct manager has some power over my future, over my salary, over my career progression, and product owner, like our Scrum Master, tells us we are equals, so he is not my manager, I am very likely to listen to my manager, not to my product owner. And this like typically just keeps popping up again and again in different situations until it grows into a big snowball. And after that, the companies which have changed nothing in their structures but try to apply some practices, they proclaim that Agile is dead, that Scrum doesn't help, that we only have new tensions and new frictions in the company, but we don't get any improvement in the value delivery. This is what I observe very often, and I think overcoming this is very challenging, and especially if you work in-house. If you work in-house, you typically have some contract which says what you've been hired to do, and very often it's limited only to the team level. When you're a consultant, it's a bit easier because you can just basically decline offerings of such companies which want you to do some work only on the team level.
That's kind of interesting that you mentioned about the managerial line, the direct reportees line, and how it impacts the work with product teams, with product owners or product managers. So can you explain maybe how to tackle that problems, or what would be like the right structure? Do you have some cases like that? I mean, I bet you have because you just mentioned about that. So if you can like spill a little bit of the secret how to tackle that problems.
Once again, I'm usually try to be very accurate with the advices I give. So I will just make a disclaimer that this advice makes sense only if you're aiming in a company, you're aiming for maximizing its agility and shortening the feedback loops. I would say that one of the ways to reduce this tension is to basically change the reporting structure in the company. For example, the company I worked with over the last 3 years, they still had the role of an engineering manager whom the engineers were reporting to. And by engineers, I mean here not only like developers, but also testers, like QA specialists, maybe some analysts. And so we were treating each cross-functional team as a long-living, stable group. So we were not pulling it apart and putting people into new teams every, few months or every year. And every engineering manager was basically attached to a set of teams. Usually it was 2-3 teams, and all engineers from this team were reporting to that manager. And so it already imposes some limitations because, of course, like the engineering manager who comes from the, backend development background, he cannot help with technical questions to the front-end developers or to the QA specialists. He cannot teach them how to write good test cases and how to automate them. But this was also not what we were expecting. We were expecting engineering manager to be solely a people manager, the person who helps people with understanding their career path using like coaching and mentoring skills, the person who can help them with uncovering new areas for improvements and making sure that whenever they improve, it's reflected in their salary or in their career progression. And what's also important, since engineering manager was attached to a fixed set of teams, they were also working closely with the product managers of those teams, or product owners, we might call them. So in this case, the engineering manager and product person, they were working in collaboration, defining the goals for the team together, not separately. And this way we were avoiding these conflicting goals and this unnecessary competition between the product side and between the tech side.
That's refreshing. And that sounds pretty, simple to implement, yet a lot of companies kind of doesn't understand that there is like this split between this is the technology department, this is the product department, and we're not collaborating. We're just fighting over, the different goals and objectives. That's sometimes a sad truth of how the collaboration looks like in the company. So thank you for that idea. Maybe our listeners will be inspired to, well, change their reporting lines if of course they have a direct influence on
Yeah.
that because you need that. And you as a consultant, I think you have that kind of fresh perspective and also authority because people are basically like hiring you to like achieve certain outcomes, to achieve certain results, and you already like kind of have that consultant authority, so you can, for example, talk to, I don't know, CEO, CTO, and people who have the impact and can actually change something in the, for example, the structure of reporting lines. And to build on that, what's the most rewarding part of your job? I think I mentioned one.
I think the most rewarding part of my job is when the ideas, the practices, the tools, uh, well, it's often called the philosophy, though I hate when they call it agile philosophy, but okay, the philosophy or the mindset, when it's not only you bringing it to the workplace, but when you finally see it spreading in the workplace, when for example, the development team finally understands that, okay, daily Scrum is not for, is not there in order to report to the product owner, but it's for them to actually synchronize on the current progress towards the sprint goal and what they need to focus on the next 24 hours. When the product owner finally understands that, well, okay, they don't need to be the person trying to please every stakeholder, but they need to have a clear way to define priorities, I don't know, using some scoring model or some other approaches, putting it into a prioritized list where there are no several P0s and P1s, but a clear ordered list of backlog items and communicating it to the team and to the stakeholders. When also the managers finally start to understand that their idea is not to control people, but to work on the system level and remove impediments in the system which undermine the team's performance or undermine further opportunities for growth of a team. And we can like come up with such examples at all levels of the organization. But to wrap it up, basically the most rewarding part of my job is to see that at some point I'm not needed anymore, and that as soon as I leave, the organization will not just roll back to the previous state, but it will continue evolving in the direction that they've set for themselves.
And you said about a mindset shift, kind of implementing the agile philosophy. I know you don't like it, but let's call it like, philosophy and changing the mindset. Yeah, that's very often the kind of start of every change, to reshape your mindset, to reshape the kind of approach or let's stay here. And with the mindset, I think a great way to actually change your mindset is sport, because it teaches you a lot about mindset, and you do that on a regular basis.
That's true.
Yeah. So let's move right now to the topic of sports and professional discipline. How do you? My first question is about how do you balance your various trainings, preparations to the triathlon, for example, with your professional responsibilities? How do you find that balance? It's difficult.
Yeah, it's difficult, and you very often need to sacrifice something. Unfortunately or fortunately, I'm still doing sports only as an amateur, and I'm not earning any money for living for doing that. Therefore, typically, what gets sacrificed if it is sports. But I mean, I have a very long story of relationships with sports, which lasts, I think, over the last 15 years or so, and. The key I understood one very simple idea, which is it's not something I came up with. It's quote of one of the sports/business influencers I follow, that if it matters to you, you will make time for it. So if you basically actually want to do sports, even if you, I don't know, currently in a difficult situation in your workplace and you need to, I don't know, work for 8-10 hours every day because you need to overcome some critical scenario. If taking care of your fitness, if taking care of your health matters to you, you will find time to do that. You will wake up at 6 a.m. to go to the, I don't know, to the swimming pool or to the gym before work, or you will stay later and go to the gym at 8 p.m., which I don't recommend because it's not very sustainable in the very long term. And as an agile coach, I'm here to teach about sustainable pace, but you will make time if it's needed. So usually I try to come up with a more structured and disciplined schedule for myself, especially now when I'm preparing to my triathlon debut and I need to train a lot. Like typically it's about 7 to 9 hours every week. Luckily, I'm working with a coach who provides me with a program, and she usually submits it on Sunday. So when I take a look at the next week and I know how many training blocks will I have and how much time I will need to spend on the bike or running, I then also take a look at my working calendar and what's there and try to somehow fit it in. So sometimes I may, for example, if I have a short, easy run, I may do it not in the morning or in the evening, but in the lunch break. Sometimes when I need to do what's called a break in triathlon, so basically combination of two disciplines. For example, I need to ride for 1 hour on a bike and then go for an easy run for half an hour. This I will of course do either in the morning or in the evening. But besides time, I think another thing which you need to balance is the energy, because it's very difficult to be focused and very useful at your workplace when you come there after, I know, 2 hours of training in the morning. So this is also something I try to keep in mind and when structuring my time.
That's interesting. It's more about energy management combined with time management and also priorities. And how or what lessons from athletic training have you applied to your professional life? Do you have any examples of that?
I have many, I must say. I was thinking about that specific question while preparing for our recording, and I suddenly understood that there are many things that I was applying unconsciously and which were very helpful. So one thing I typically like to bring to the workplaces is the concept of having a clear intent and working towards it, even if it's not that comfortable or if it doesn't bring you pleasure. What do I mean? So let's say I, as an agile consultant, come to a company which wants to speed up its delivery. And let's say this is like some old company which was used to, I don't know, releasing something every 6 months or like every quarter and not doing any releases in between. So of course, switching to, for example, monthly releases or bi-weekly releases will be painful to them at first. And they might not have the infrastructure needed for that. The developers might say that it's impossible. We've never been working like that. But as soon as you start working in that direction, you have a clear intention and you start doing small steps in that way, it will become much easier, just like in the sports. Like you can't spend all your life on the couch and then suddenly stand up and go run the full marathon, which is 42 kilometers. Well, you may probably do this, but you will likely end like the person who introduced the marathon running to the world. You will just typically die. Yeah. And but as soon as you have a clear goal, let's say I want to run a marathon in 1 year, you can start doing the so-called backwards planning. So you can start thinking, okay, so this is my current state of my fitness, endurance, and this is my target. Like, let's say I want to run a marathon in less than 5 hours. You can think about, okay, what's the pace I need to do for that? You can hire a coach which could help you to understand, okay, what's the endurance capabilities you will need to develop. And then you will start doing some small runs, like, I don't know, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, then it will turn to 5 kilometers. Then at some half a year later, 10-kilometer run will become something normal for you. And it's exactly the same like with this change of the delivery cycle. Like in the beginning, every release will be painful. There will be lots of errors, like, I don't know, incidents popping up. lots of rollbacks in order to decrease the impact on the end user. But as you keep doing it, because you know what's your end goal, you will master it and it will become easier. And then you will, like, I don't know, 2 years later, a year and a half later, you will find yourself in a situation when every team you have might release multiple times per sprint, and it's already a new normal thing for them. When you have a clear understanding where you want to come, especially ideally when you support it with some measurable outcomes, and when you know where you are right now, it's very easy to come up with a path towards the final goal. But it will typically require some small steps which might be uncomfortable in the beginning. It's similar in the sports. It's similar in the introducing agile practices and tools to the workplace.
Okay, that's one big lesson, I would say.
But not the only. Not the only. I have more if you want.
Yeah, I want more because that's very interesting. You just, you emphasized on the importance of end goals.
Yeah.
So, what are the other steps, maybe?
Yeah, I think another topic is another similar topic between the world of physics and sports and the world of business is like basically the idea of fitness. And I think this is very similar to what happened to the agile. So as I said before, very often people associate agile just with some practices. So, and the only way they measure whether they are agile or not is by whether we have all the practices, whether we can check out all the boxes or not. Once again, they are missing the purpose. So the whole purpose of like agile approach and the agile practices is to provide business with sustainability and ability to resist to external factors which can influence its business performance, its balance sheets, its share in the market. The same with the sports. Like we very often see people who, for example, do sports, but they only want to look nice. They don't care about the overall fitness, their longevity, how good do they feel. They get too focused on only like the picture in the mirror and completely ignore the rest. And I think in both cases, this is a bit of a wrong approach. Like I think that ideally, when you are doing sports, you need to focus on overall fitness and health and define some clear goals. And maybe sometimes you will need to change the means of achieving that. So let's say once when I was preparing for my first half marathon, which seemed to be a big challenge for me back then, I had a steady plan of preparation. I knew how many races, how many runs I need to do every week, etc. But then, like when I was, I think, 3 weeks from the race, I suddenly got a flu, or maybe it was a COVID. I don't know, something else. But I understand what I was. My first thought was, okay, it's not that bad. It's only like 37 and a half temperature, so I may still go out for a run, and like I need to adhere to the plan and just keep doing it. But then I understood that, okay, probably the fitness I've built over the last 10 weeks is already good enough for me to finish the marathon. And the best thing I can do for myself right now is, instead of go and follow the plan, just stay in the bed for a few days, recover, and come back on track in a good state. The same thing relates to like agility. In fact, very often we might need to drop some practices to replace some practices with something different, or to change some ways of doing. For example, one of my previous companies where I worked for quite some time, after 2 years I've been with them, they suddenly decided to change the target audience of their product. So they were producing a B2B software, and until that moment they were mostly focused on small and medium enterprises, for companies which buy one or two licenses and that have less than 50 people in the office. But they understood that in order to retain their sustainable growth goals, and in order to be ready for the IPO or maybe the next investment round, they probably need to shift their focus to big corporate clients, companies who would buy more than 50 licenses, who would have the whole department using their software. And they suddenly, they just changed the user persona they wanted to focus on, and everything else remained as it was. But after some time, they started to receiving feedback that from these big new corporate clients that they are getting overwhelmed with the amount of updates we're making to the product. That when we were doing, like, every team in this company, and there were like 50 teams, every team in this company might have done several releases per sprint, resulting in many changes in the product. And small companies were really enjoying it because they were seeing some new features, they wanted to play with it, they wanted to see how it can benefit their business. But it was easy because there were only 1 or 2 people in the company using it. When you have 500 people using it, and these are typically people who are not very high in the decision making ladder, you need them to know how to use it. You need to teach them, you need to educate them. And that's why typically when B2B companies are rolling out their software to a new client, they have some consultants go to the company and teach people how to use the software. And of course, when we were releasing some new updates tens of times every sprint, for these 500 people in a corporate bank, it was a problem, not a benefit. They were struggling from it. And after receiving such a feedback from multiple clients, the company suddenly realized that how we used to do it in the past doesn't work anymore. We need to change. We need to, even though we are capable of releasing every sprint or even multiple times per sprint, we probably need to decrease the frequency of releases. We need to do it, once in a month, providing some clearly defined update document and user guide document to the customers. In the same way, so the goal remained the same: to be sustainable as a business, to have a positive balance sheet, to reduce the burn rate, but the means of achieving that have changed. And I would say that exactly the ability of a company to recognize such things and to be able to quickly introduce such changes is the essence of agility and agile. Just like taking care of yourself and being able to adapt to the circumstances is the essence of fitness and health.
That's very eye-opening and interesting. And moving to the kind of mindset and preparations, how you prepare mentally and physically for the races, does it positively affect your work as an agile coach?
I would say so. So, that might sound a bit cliche because you hear it from every second professional athlete, but I really like that even professional athletes at some points, they understand that, okay, they're maybe earning money for living by doing sports. They might be competing, I don't know, every month with someone, or if they're a team player, they can be competing every week. But in the end, in order to be successful, they need to compete and become better than they were yesterday. So they need to compete with themselves, not with other people. And when I'm preparing for some races or for some workouts, I typically focus on, like, not, I don't know, benching more than the guy on the other benching rack, or not like squatting more than someone else, or not running faster than another guy doing the workout at the same track. But I just want to be I just want to adhere to the plan, and I just want to be better than myself yesterday. So let's say if I'm running the same distance and I know that I need to run it easy, okay, I will not focus on pushing it, but I will at least focus on how I feel during that race. Does covering the same distance feels easier than it felt yesterday? Do I feel any improvements or not? And I think the same relates to my professional work life. So there is a very good document, I, by the way, recommend to anyone interested about agile coaching or already practicing agile coaching. So the Agile Alliance, they have a ethics guide or like guide for ethical agile coaching, which covers like some key ethical pillars of the agile coaching craftsmanship. And one of them is like continuous reflection and growth. So you thinking that even if you have, I don't know, tens of years of experience, like hundreds of practices in your toolbox, thinking that you're already done, that you're already there and you have nothing to learn, I think this is a epiphany for an agile coach. You always need to look for ways to improve. for ways to help your customers, for ways to help your company or teams, or I don't know, organization, depending on what level you work. And you need to understand that the only person you are competing against is not like the manager who is resistant to your suggestions. It's not the team who, I don't know, want to skip the retrospective this time, but it's yourself and your ability to, I don't know, to provide logical argumentation, to win the arguments, and to basically make people understand the value of things you're bringing, not just the mechanics of the things you're bringing.
And you mentioned again about a lot about the change, about managing resistance, and also kind of applying the feedback from a manager, or like providing the feedback to the people who have the impact on your kind of ways of working, let's say, on the company, how the company operates. And what's the key to managing change well when a company starts using Agile?
I think it will be difficult for me to come up with something really fresh and new because when it comes to change management and working with change, I typically rely on the classics of change management, the ideas that were provided by Mr. Kotter, and the 8 steps of change management by Kotter, which, if you are not familiar with, you can read about it online. I also recommend the original book of the author called Leading the Change. So I think there are key crucial factors. First of all, and that's the thing that's often missing, is the idea of like why the change needs to happen. What's the sense of the urgency for this change? Why it should happen now? And this sense of urgency needs to exist on different level of the organization. If, let's say, the top management believes that I know the teams, the departments need to suddenly transition to an agile way of working, but not because there is some business survival need, but just because everyone around is doing that, this change is likely to fail because there is no sense of urgency around doing this change. Also, when the top management has this sense of urgency, they understand why the company will not survive if it keeps working like it works now. But people in the teams, people in the middle management don't get it. If the top management fails to communicate it properly, then this change will also likely to face some sabotage or some resistance, and it will not succeed. So first thing is a sense of urgency for the change. Second thing, which is often overlooked in my opinion, is that ideally we need to, so the second step in Kotter's model is creating the group of people who will work on that change. And in my opinion, it's very important when we talk about agile transitions, I know, continuous improvement, all this stuff, this group also needs to be cross-functional. So if the change management group consists only of Scrum Masters or Agile coaches, it's very difficult to take all the viewpoints into account. It's very difficult to take all the potential problems into account. In my previous company, at some point we arrived to a very structured change management approach, and there were a few crucial factors we wanted about it. So first of all, we wanted every change experiment to be time limited and with clearly defined success criteria and metrics. Second thing, we wanted every change initiative to be led by a cross-functional group of, like, let's say, several engineering managers, several Scrum Masters, maybe someone from the product management, in order to take all the perspectives into account and in order to take a holistic view on this change. And last advice of mine is that this change experiment should not be only limited in time, but it should be also limited in space. So for me, I feel that the so-called big bang agile transformations, when the company of, 1,000 people or 500 people suddenly decides that the whole company is switching to the new way of working, they often fail, or at least they turn into so-called lipstick agile. So when we do some practices, when we apply new titles, but there is no real change, no new mindset. So what I typically recommend is to localize the initial experiment. Take, like, let's say, take one department or take one product line, which is the most crucial for you. Design the way the process, the structure should look like in the new reality. Present it to people and ask for volunteers. So present the new reality, the new way of working, and why we want to work in that way to big group of people, and ask for, like, I don't know, 20, 30, 50 volunteers who are ready to try it out. Because this will be the people who will support the idea, who will not sabotage it, who will not resist it, and it's more likely to result in successful outcome. And then, but it's very also important that even if this initial pilot succeeds, you still don't need to jump into the big bang transformation. You can expand the size of that bubble, pulling in more people into it, but still doing it incrementally. So let's say you kicked off this pilot product group or something like that with 50 people. It starts to show success. You as a company leader gain trust into the new ways of working. Okay, let's add 50 more people next quarter, then 50 more people next quarter, and so on and so forth. It may be not as quick as many people think that agile transformation would be, but believe me, in terms of outcomes and in terms of results, it typically produces much better results than a big bang change.
That's similar to when you're trying to make changes in your life. If you like tackle every kind of, if you tackle finances, if you tackle sport, I want to eat healthy, I want to sleep more, and I want to like be the best in a job, but also take care of my finances. And then at some point, everything is just in a mess and not leading to any kind of significant outcomes. So that's also like I think applicable in life, not only at work. Um, and and also what happens during a change is this kind of feeling of uncertainty. How do you help teams deal with the uncertainty of the change, of the result of change?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I may need to come up with an answer straight away. But what I typically try to, so maybe we need to quickly jump back to the way I present myself and to my title. So I typically represent myself as organizational design and agility consultant, with an emphasis on specific practices like Scrum, like LeSS framework. And LeSS, if you are not familiar with it, is the Scrum approach for scaling Scrum. So when you have more than one Scrum team, how to properly set up the organization to work in this way. And what I really like about LeSS, so what it typically says is it has some principles for implementation for LeSS implementation. And one of the principles is that nobody will lose the job, but some people may need to change the title. Let's say if we are moving to a new setup and for example, the role you used to have before will cease to exist in the company, nobody will fire you, nobody will lay you off. You will be provided with some range of opportunities, what other roles you can undertake in order to be helpful to the company in its new future. Of course, it's up to a person to decide whether they want to do that or not, whether they're ready to do some kind of career pivot or not. And but even if they are not, typically I advise companies to provide some time frame where these people can still stay with the company and look for some good opportunities on the market. And in this way, we first of all retain only people who want to be in the change, who want to be part of the change, but at the same time, we don't stress out the rest of the workforce. We don't stress out the rest of the people. This is one thing. Another thing I think which is also always missing is just having frequent conversations, listening to people, establishing good, trusted relationships with people, and listening to what they have to say. I think this is the job of a people manager, and this is the job of leaders of the company. Of course, it depends on the size of the company, and if you have, I don't know, multiple thousands of people in under your brand, the CEO or CTO of the company can't be the one walking around and talking to every person, but you have the management for that. And I think that for managers, it's very important to be proficient in skills like active listening, like mentoring, like counseling, like advising, because if you are not listening to people you're supposed to manage, how can you actually manage them? So you can actually manipulate them in order to achieve some of your own goals, but you are not likely to put them into a seat of a co-creator with you. Like, I think that despite the difference in the way in the organizational hierarchy, the managers should be on the same level with engineers. They should, or like with people they're managing, and they need to have conversations. They need to know not only how good the person is performing, but also what's happening in their personal life, what are the stress things that might be stressing them out outside of the job, how, and also be really maybe good friends in some way.
Yeah, very often people say like, "Oh, we don't have time we don't have time for that. We need to like focus on the results." And yeah, we are at work. We should focus on this or this because the business is the most important. But we tend to forget that the business is about relationship building. Yeah, the business is about trust, about respect, about these kind of values. And very often, leaders or managers, because I will not call these people leaders, managers are forgetting about the basic values that we should implement in our day to day and behave the same as in personal life, as in professional life, because that brings authenticity. Yeah.
Both of us were at the Agile Swarming conference just
Yeah.
2 days ago, and it was all about leadership. And I really liked one of the talks by an Agile coach from Czech Republic who was talking about leadership in a remote setup. And
Mm.
one thing he really emphasized there is that, okay, there might be lots of conversations about whether the remote setup leads to decrease in performance, etc. But one thing we definitely see is that very often people get burnt out in the remote setup because
Mm.
they basically, when your home becomes your workplace, the border between your personal time and work time suddenly ceases to exist. You start, very often people start working much more time than they would work in the office, because in the office they know that they need to be there from 8 to 5 or from 9 to 6, and as soon as they left the building they are detached from work. Typically they have their family, they have their sports, they have their routines. But if when your work comes to a home, this border ceases to exist, and you may start answering working emails at 9 p.m. I don't know, signing up for a customer interviews at 6 a.m. because it's happening in a different time zone, and that often leads to burnout. And I think one of the good traits for managers and leaders in a remote setup is to actually keep an eye on that. And if you see that people are messaging in Slack at 10 p.m., or that somebody is writing an email at 2 a.m., call it out and tell people that, look, I understand that you're doing it for the common purpose, but this is very likely to harm yourself. And like, we appreciate your approach, but we want everyone to have a sustainable pace, to be able to support it forever. So please don't do this outside of the working hours until there is some critical incident or something like that. I think this is another way how leaders and managers can show that they actually care about people they manage.
The only thing I say about remote work that it needs clear boundaries also set to yourself. Like in sport, you said, yeah, like you're training on a regular basis. You have a kind of you committed yourself to do to achieve that goal, and it's the same, I think, with kind of remote work setup. You need to set the rules and boundaries for yourself, and also like communicate it to the manager if he's not supporting you, or yeah, whatever is the reason. And now we will maybe move to the topic of resistance. Yeah, what strategies work best for dealing with resistance to agile?
I think, by the way, the advice I can give is very similar to the previous one. You just need to really listen to people and be curious about what are the roots of this resistance. So as we mentioned when talking about the uncertainty of change, very often one of the roots of a resistance is that people suddenly lose job safety. They feel that they might not be needed in the new environment, that uh, they fail to follow the new rules of the game. They will be fired or something like that. And in general, we need to understand that every change, especially when it's a sudden and imposed from a side change, it's very stressful. Like I went through it, for example, 2 years ago when I had to move and change the country of living, not because I wanted to, but because the political and like other circumstances in the world. And believe me, like a person who lived in like 4 different countries, and 3 out of these 4 moves were conscious and by my decision. When every change which you are imposed to do, which is imposed on you, not which you decide to do yourself, is much more stressful. And that's how people typically feel in the companies and the organizations when this new way of working, this new agile stuff is getting imposed into them without talking to them, without understanding what are their concerns, without clearly articulating what are the problems with the existing working process and why company is not succeeding with it. So I usually try to understand what are the fears, what are the concerns that people have. I also try to understand, okay, maybe you don't see the problems that the manager highlights, but maybe you have your own issues with the current working process. Maybe you're unhappy about, like, I don't know, unclear ticket requirements. Maybe you're pissed off by the time it takes to get your merge request reviewed and merged. Maybe you're pissed by how often you deliver something and then nobody uses it. And I typically try to find the problems which the agile or agile approaches might help to solve, and present these benefits to that specific person. So I basically try to connect the benefits of the approach we are trying to bring with the challenges of a specific person. Because, like, well, let's be honest, unless you're working in some startup and you're one of, I don't know, first 10 or 50 employees, you typically don't care that much about the company well-being, balance sheets, and all that stuff. You just want to make sure that you have job safety, that you have some social benefits, and that you can be sure that you will not be laid off in like 2 months from now. And all these words about what's better for the company, like the positive social influence on the environment, etc. Not every employee actually cares about it. So we need to find the keys to people. We need to find the problems they face in their daily life, which the new approach might help them to resolve. It will not work with all 100% of people. I might say from my experience that typically there is at least 10 to 20% of people leaving the company very soon after the transformation starts because they just don't want to deal with it. Maybe they have some previous traumatic experience with transformation in different company. Maybe they just really don't want to work in a team. They don't want to communicate. They just want to get their ticket, read it, transform it into code, create pull requests, and forget about it. And it's totally okay. It's totally fine. Just the new reality of the company and the processes the company needs might not be suitable place for that person anymore. This is something we just need to accept and admit.
Yeah, exactly, and it's okay. Yeah, sometimes you treat your work as your passion, but sometimes you have like a different kind of field where you realize yourself, and the work is just the work. You're coming there, you're doing your tasks, and keep yourself, like, stick to the kind of roles and responsibilities, and you leave, and that's all. And sometimes that's all you can do because, for example, you can't emotionally attach to the workplace for any reason. Yeah.
Exactly.
And that's also fine. Yeah.
And as we were talking in the beginning, you can't be really successful in something if you feel no passion towards it. So if after the new process or culture gets implemented in the workplace, you suddenly lose any passion you had towards this company, towards this employer, this is totally fine to change the employer and totally fine to change the company. I think we are not, unlike our parents, we are not anymore in a world where we want to get a profession, go get hired in a company and spend all 20 lives of our work life in the same company and then go on a retirement and just enjoy our retirement. I think, like, I myself have been switching companies very often, and not always only for good reasons. Sometimes also for reasons that I joined the company, I was promised one thing in terms of like what will be my responsibilities, what does the company really need, and then suddenly you realize that in reality it's absolutely different, that nobody wants to change. They just want you to maintain the status quo and just do some small things on the team level. I don't know, do some Jira report, etc. And okay, then I just can understand that I can leave. So one very important lesson I learned while working and living in Germany is that the probation period is not only for the employee, but also for the company. You have the probation period to also test out the company you've joined, not only for the company to test out you.
Yeah, I love that approach. And yeah, I think, you start to realize that the kind of the longer you're working, the more often you change the companies, the more senior, let's say, you're becoming, then you start to understand that, yeah, it's for both. Yeah, the probation period. If you don't pass, it's not anyone's fault. You just don't fit together. That's all.
That's true.
And and this is also a kind of good feedback mechanism, maybe, or opportunity to provide the feedback. So, how important is feedback for improving in Agile?
I think it's the cornerstone. I think the whole Agile is about having clear feedback loops, shortening them as much as possible, and iterating on the feedback you receive. Like you can take the Agile Manifesto, the original principles of Agile Manifesto, that business people and engineering should work closely together and frequently communicate. This is all about having feedback. You can take Scrum framework, where they have daily Scrum in order to have at least daily feedback loops, and you have sprint review, where you need to have at least once in a sprint feedback loop with your stakeholders and users. So feedback is crucial. And what I often see people missing is that, first of all, they don't rely on quantifiable feedback, for example, metrics, and they don't make the difference between leading and lagging indicators. So very often there are feedback we can receive only after some time. And by the time we receive it, it may be too late to make some changes. So every time we're establishing some metrics or feedback sources, we need to identify whether this is a leading or lagging indicator. And if this is a lagging indicator, we need to think, okay, what are the leading metrics we can attach to it? What I mean by that, lagging indicator is something where you usually have a delay between the moment you make an action and the feedback comes. So I don't know, let's say you're living in an old building and you have old pipes, and when you go to the shower and between the moment you change the temperature and until the moment the water actually starts to come, there might be, I don't know, 30 seconds, 1 minute. This is a delay. In this case, the temperature of the water is your lagging indicator, but you also have this, if you live in this house for a long time, you know how many shifts to the left or to the right you need to make in order to get to a comfortable temperature, and this can be your leading indicator. So the just how many clicks you have made. The same with the business. Okay, what can it be? Let's say that you're developing a mobile application, and by the end of the quarter you want to have average you want to reach 4.6 evaluation on the App Store. You will not know if you've reached it or not until the quarter ends, because this you go for the quarter. But you may also attach some leading indicators to it. Like, let's say we want to have at least 500 users who leave 5 stars reviews after they download the application. And as the quarter goes on, you can see how many users you have who have actually downloaded the app and left the 5 stars review. So in this way, even if you have a lagging indicator, you can still track the progress towards it on a daily basis or on a weekly basis. And I think this is what's important, balancing the amount of leading and lagging indicators you are setting up for the feedback loops you're interested in.
And yeah, like to make it more structured, because I know that people like specific steps and advices.
Yeah.
At least I'm also like that kind of person who likes systems. So how do you kind of set up good feedback systems within and between the teams? Do you have like any principles?
In between teams, it's much more challenging and interesting. So the number one rule I have, which I hope all the Scrum Masters and Agile coaches already know, don't compare teams. Because whatever metric you take, be it a velocity, be it a throughput, be it a cycle time or something else, there can be gazillions of factors influencing those metrics. Like with velocity, we know it's the simplest. One story point in one team and one story point in the second team might be two different story points. But the same relates to, for example, throughput. If one product owner keeps bringing big backlog items to the team and they don't break them down really well, their throughput will by default be smaller than the throughput of a team which does good decomposition. The same with the cycle time. So first rule is don't compare teams based on the metrics. Second, ideally to start with, like as usual, start with why. Why you want to measure something? What are the decisions you want to make based on those metrics, on that feedback, and how you're going to use it? And then think about what metrics can be helpful. One approach I really like to use is the tree of metrics, where we basically try to we may start with a single metric we want to have in there, like let's say team performance or team maturity. We can then brainstorm and think of, what kind of metrics contribute to this team maturity? It's probably cycle time. So how long does it take to get work done? It may be, I don't know, the size of the team. It may be the stability of the team composition, and so on and so forth. Then we think, when it comes to stability of team composition, what are the metrics we can apply here? It's probably how long the team remains intact, how often people change, what's the churn rate in the team, etc., etc. When it comes to, let's say, cycle time, what are the factors influencing it? Let's say, how long does it take to develop something? How long does it take to review something? How long does it take to test something? And this way, by starting with why, with the end goal, I keep repeating it throughout the whole podcast, sorry, but starting with the end goal and then breaking it down into smaller pieces which contribute to this end goal, you can come up with a set of metrics which can be really helpful. And and last but not the least, don't forget to make a check on the leading and lagging indicators. Let's take cycle time. Cycle time will be a lagging indicator. As a leading indicator, you can use the so-called work in progress aging. You can learn more about it from the Professional Scrum with Kanban guide. So basically, work in progress aging is for how long this item has been in progress since the moment it has been started. And you can already start seeing if it's expanding beyond your cycle time or not, if it's a good age or not.
Yeah, I was smiling because at the beginning of the year, I was making the certificate from Kanban, and also like done some kind of talk on Instagram about how I prepare to this exam. And I was the first time when I like consciously started to prepare to the exam, not just to pass the exam, but to learn something.
Yeah.
and
I can say that for any Scrum Master, Agile Coach, or even the manager who are interested about using metrics as feedback loops, there are at least two body of knowledges I highly recommend. So the first one is the Kanban method and everything about it, like the Kanban University, the Professional Scrum with Kanban guide from scrum.org, the Pro Kanban. And another one is the evidence-based management guide by scrum.org, because it provides an explicit list of metrics which you can apply in order to measure the value, the current value, the unrealized value, the current ability to innovate. So basically all set of metrics to analyze both your product performance and your process efficiency or process performance.
Yeah, thank you for mentioning that. The EBM, is not like very popular, I would say. I mean, Kanban is like more popular and more people heard about it. So the EBM, I hope like listeners will be interested in that and maybe try to dive into this topic. And to wrap up our conversation, because it's very interesting, but in the same time, I know that we need to finish soon. So what's the most important piece of advice you'd like to give to our listeners?
Yeah, I think that my key advice would be, so all the things you advise or teach to others, like, I don't know, continuous improvement, reflecting on yourself, establishing feedback loops, all these advices we typically bring to the companies, apply them to yourself too, because these are the things that can and will be helpful not only in your professional career but also in your personal life and personal endeavors.
Yeah, and that brings a kind of this integration piece, because whatever you talk about or speak to other people, you don't feel like imposter syndrome because you know that you've done that in the past. Yeah. And sometimes it needs time to actually reflect on yourself and say, like, but oh, okay, I'm implementing that in my daily life. So it's very important. Thank you. And it's also the way to, conquer the imposter syndrome. Um, What's the one thing you're most looking forward to achieving in this year?
Well, when I come to the point of planning the next year, I typically try to set some goals for myself, and I typically break them down into three categories. So the personal, professional, and something related to mental or health, these kind of things. So when it comes to my personal goal, I think the key goal I have this year is to successfully finish the renovation, which hasn't started yet, and move to my own apartment. I hope this will happen this year. When it comes to professional, it's a bit more complicated, but there are definitely some things I'd like to achieve. Probably the next big thing I'm looking to is speaking at the XP 2024 conference in Bolzano, because this is the biggest Agile conference in Europe. And I'm very lucky to be on the speakers list. So I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, and on health and mental stuff, of course, it's my triathlon debut, which you mentioned. Just to make it clear, I'm not a triathlonist yet. I am only learning to do this, and to me, if I don't drown on the swimming stage, this will already be a success. So I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully, it will go well.
It sounds really exciting. And at the same time challenging. So I'm wishing you all the best. And I'm sure that you'll do it. Yeah, you're preparing yourself very well, so you'll do it.
Thank you. Thank you, Beata.
And where listeners can find you and how you can help them.
Well, there are several sources. If they're more interested in me as a person, I think the easiest way is to follow my Instagram, which is where my tag is basically at Agile Expat, to get written together without any signs in between. It started initially as a professional blog, but since sports plays an important role in my life, it has transcended into more like personal blog. If they're interested to learn more about my professional activity, they can check out my website, agileexpat.com, or my LinkedIn, where they can search me by my name and surname. I'm not really active writing on LinkedIn. This is my zone for growth for sure, but I will be more than happy to get in touch, to answer some questions people might have, or even maybe, I don't know, schedule some kind of conversation with companies. When it comes to helping, so there are several things. First thing, when we talk to helping individuals, is probably mentoring. I'm quite active in mentoring, and I typically have at least 2 or 3 people I'm mentoring in parallel at the same time. When it comes to companies, I think there is a much wider variety of choice. So we can collaborate on some consulting activities. We can also collaborate on some educational activities. Together with my partners, I'm regularly delivering the classes or certified classes on team facilitation and on agile coaching. So yeah, to be honest, the opportunities are endless. And if you have some issues you are really facing and you need to change and you need help in implementing change, feel free to reach out and we can have a conversation on that.
Thank you, Denis. Thank you for being my guest, for sharing your knowledge, and I'm wishing you all the best, in this year and for the next year, and for all these challenges and goals that you want to achieve. And I believe in you. I'm your fan.
Thank you very much, Beata. To be honest, it's mutual. I was also very happy to see you finishing your first half marathon, and I wish you success with your marathon preparation. And yeah, also I'm really a big fan of your podcast, so I hope it will bring you to even higher stages of recognition. Good job, keep
Thank
doing
you.
it.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Denis. Thanks for joining me on another episode of Doing It My Way by Beata Matras. If you enjoyed this episode, please do not forget to subscribe. Remember, this podcast is a dynamic journey and your feedback is very welcomed. Connect with me on social media. I would like to hear your thoughts, questions, and topic suggestions. And stay tuned for upcoming episodes. And until next time, keep doing it your way.